Hello and welcome to I Talk to Ghosts. I'm your haunted host, Jennifer, a spirit medium and a collector of all the chilling ghost stories I can find so I can share them with you, my spooky listener. So tonight, let me ask you, have you ever had an experience in a creepy forest or felt that the area of the woods that you ventured into was suddenly not so inviting? If so, I would love to hear your story. In the meantime, I have collected some unsettling tales to read to you this evening. And later on, I will share another spirit reading with you with my next guest. I am always so excited to share these readings with you because they're just so specific and they're just unexplainably wondrous and magical to me. And there's just no describing it. It's best to just share it and show it. And I'm just so grateful for the opportunity to be able to do that. And later on, I will have another spirit message for those listening to the podcast. This message may be specifically for you. That's later on in the episode. But first, are you ready for the spooky? Let's go into the dark woods together. The creepy starts now. My dad and I both feel that there is something outside the gates at my cottage in the woods. I really don't know how to describe it. It just feels like there's some incredibly evil entity just outside the gates when you go near there at night. It's sort of similar to the feeling you get when someone is staring at you, but less human, as well as an intense wave of fear. One night, about 3 years ago, we were having a bonfire with a bunch of my family, and the topic naturally turned to ghost stories. After a few stories, my cousin mentions that he always gets creeped out walking near the cottage gate at night, and he described the feeling as if he was being watched, coupled with intense fear. I had never mentioned this to him before. Of course, we 3 idiots decide to go over there to check it out. I should mention that both my dad and cousin had had a few drinks. They weren't falling over themselves though, and I was completely sober. So we get to the gate, and we all have a feeling of being a bit creeped out. Of course we do. We practically convinced ourselves at this point that something would be waiting for us in the dark. Therefore, to really explore the area, we decided to go out onto the road and walk down the hill towards the swampy lake area. My dad and cousin were talking themselves up and basically daring whatever it was to prove it exists. Meanwhile, I'm praying nothing happens and we can go back to the warm bonfire. All of a sudden, my dad is upside down, and then he's on the ground. It's like he was picked up by his ankles and turned upside down, and then dropped. There is no way it could have happened like that if he had simply slipped down the hill. He's a pretty big guy and not super nimble. There was nothing there, nothing else around us. We helped my dad back up and sprinted back to the fire. My dad had a big scrape on his face, and no one believed our story. I wouldn't have either if I hadn't actually seen it. I grew up in a rural part of Ohio. My house had fairly dense woods located directly behind it. As a child, I had a passion for exploring. I especially loved exploring those woods. It was my favorite place to be. I had wandered through those woods many times, always with my mother's permission. There was one tree in particular that I frequently enjoyed climbing, usually about the halfway mark, so I could perch myself on one of the heavier branches and just relax as I listened to the peaceful sounds of nature. From that position, I could partially see the back of my house. On that day, after a fair amount of exploring, I carefully scaled my favorite tree. I seated myself on a sturdy branch and took in the view. Being late October, the sun inevitably began to set within a few minutes. I always felt a little sadness to see the darkness approaching. The woods were like my own little sanctuary. I could entertain myself out there for hours. When darkness began to fall, however, my mom would stand at the edge of the woods and call my name until I obediently returned home, so as not to be stranded out there after dark. After watching the sunset until I could no longer see it, I began my descent down the tree. I was nearly at the bottom when I heard my mother's familiar voice, calling my name. I thought nothing of it at first, as this routine had occurred plenty of times before. Then I realized something strange as my feet touched the ground. My mother's voice was coming from behind me, deeper in the woods, rather than towards the house where she always stood when she called me home. My mom had never entered those woods before, at least not with me. At first I was excited, eager to find her and show her all my favorite spots before it grew too dark. That's when I realized something was off. How could she have gone into the woods ahead of me? She continued calling my name, but there was something strange about it. She sounded frantic, then almost angry. Fearing that I was in trouble for reasons currently unknown, I froze in place. As her voice drew closer, I squinted my eyes to see if I could locate her and determine exactly how angry or upset she appeared to be. But I didn't see anyone there. Suddenly, I heard her voice calling my name from the direction of my house, sounding much calmer and normal. Seconds later, her voice came from somewhere within the woods. It wasn't an echo. I wasn't imagining things. I was literally hearing her beckoning me from the edge of our backyard, as well as behind me. My legs turned to jelly. I couldn't comprehend what was going on. The voice I originally believed to be her yelled from close by.
Come here, right now!
I realized that whoever or whatever was mimicking my mother was drawing nearer. I didn't question which voice was actually my mother's. Terrified of what I would see if I stood there much longer, I turned around and I ran towards the exit of the woods as quickly as my legs could possibly carry me. It was amazing that I didn't trip over something in my haste. Even though my house wasn't far away from where I'd been standing, those woods had never seemed larger to me than they did at that moment. From behind me, my mother's voice continued to call my name, now sounding desperate. Pure panic set in as my actual mother finally came into view. In my frightened state, I absolutely refused to look back. As soon as I was out of the woods and in the backyard next to my mother, the other voice was suddenly gone. Rather than fading away, it seemed to stop the very moment I stepped foot into my backyard. I must have looked as frightened as I felt because my mother asked me what was wrong. I didn't say anything until we were safely inside the house and our doors were locked. I asked my mom if she had entered the woods that day. She told me that of course she hadn't. I hesitantly asked her if she had heard anyone else calling my name and yelling. The answer to that question was also no.
Although I was still very much shaken up, I managed to explain everything that happened. My mother said I must have imagined it, that I was spending too much time out there by myself. The incident in those woods has stayed with me to this day. I can still hear that voice as clear as a bell. Whoever or whatever it was calling me sounded exactly like my mother, but I know it wasn't her. The voice also sounded strange in a way I can't fully explain. I didn't go back into the woods until I was older, and even then, I never stayed for very long. We've since moved out of that house, but my mother and I occasionally discuss what happened. She still claims that she never heard or saw anything unusual out there, but what happened in those woods continues to haunt me. Every summer, my family and I go up to 3 Lakes, Wisconsin, because my Uncle Mike has about 80 acres of property in the middle of nowhere. I've been going up there since I was born. I'm now 18. When I was about 16, we went up north as usual and drove into the woods at night. After parking, the trail in the woods is really small and narrow, not to mention pitch black. About 1/4 mile into the woods, there is a large clearing. After the clearing, you travel another 1/4 mile to reach the small rustic cabin. The cabin is off a lake, and there are no other people for miles. After the long walk in the dark, we finally reached the cabin about 11 p.m. It was my brother, my mom, my dad, and me. My Aunt Molly was going to meet up with us later and make the trek alone through the woods in the middle of the night by herself. But me, being the kind-hearted niece that I am, decided to meet her there. Okay, actually, my dad made me. I had to walk alone in the woods with nothing but a flashlight. Trust me, it was a little unnerving. As I approached the clearing, I saw 2 flashing lights darting around the ground. I stopped dead in my tracks. The lights were a pale blue color, and they continued floating around, but in the same area, never moving to other parts of the woods. After a while, they faded away, so I got up enough nerve to bolt past the clearing and head up towards the other trail. I got there and my aunt was waiting for me. I quickly picked up all her bags and told her we should get moving. I didn't mention anything about what I saw. We passed the clearing and nothing appeared, much to my relief. The next day, I asked my dad if anyone else ever owned the property. He told me that a long time ago, 2 men lived in a small cabin in the clearing. One cold winter, they sadly froze to death. When the town people grew concerned about their whereabouts, they trekked into the woods, and when they found the cabin, inside they discovered the 2 men. I was told that they were buried directly beneath the place where the lights were hovering. I'll never, ever travel alone in the woods after dark again.
Are you enjoying your ghostly visit? If so, please follow, like, comment, and share. The ghosts may be talkative, but they are lousy at marketing, so every click helps. Tell your friends, and please leave a kind review so that others might join us. The spirits, and I thank you. Joining me tonight is Paris. Paris, welcome to your spirit reading. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you very much.
Excellent. I already have a page of notes for you. Let me show you super quick. Mm-hmm.
Oh my
Spoilers.
Yeah.
I do want to say that your mom is coming through for you. Your mom has passed. That's correct.
Yes.
Okay. Some of the impression she's giving me is I'm getting this duality of structure and warmth. Is that some or tradition and but also emotion? Can you elaborate for that?
That's so her. That is so her.
Really? Okay.
Oh
great.
yeah, absolutely. She is a woman who was very accomplished in her life. Her career was related to retirement communities and helping the aging and taking care of people in the aging process. And she was one of the first women in the state of Virginia to achieve a gerontology degree. She was very active in that community. And so there are all these things that she has done to kind of open doors and do things, and was very much a, focused, structured business type person, but she was also very emotional, and would get wrapped up in her emotions quite a bit. And so it is interesting that she, would kind of share that she recognizes that.
Yeah, I think I'm sensing a lot of variety here, like a lot of different stories. And I'm also getting the sense that you get some of this from her as well, that there's this sense of structure, but also the managing of emotions a little bit. Do you find that to be true?
Yes. I mean, full disclosure. I mean, I have anxiety. I'm being treated for it. It's something that I didn't know until much later in my life. I was probably in my 30s before I got an actual diagnosis.
Sure.
And it's something that she, I think, struggled with as well, but wasn't really ever diagnosed with. And that concept of, trying to structure your life, trying to do the things you're supposed to do, but getting kind of up in your head with emotions, that's all kind of part of it. And there were a lot of memories I have of my mom where I could see that there were things emotionally that she wasn't dealing with, and they would bubble up. And to us, it would look like these kind of explosive outbursts out of nowhere, because to us, we weren't seeing what was going on in her head, and she wouldn't share any of it.
I am feeling a bit of, how do I describe this? It's this sense of perfectionism and pressure that, and it's, because we care, sometimes that can turn on ourselves, right? She's kind of acknowledging that the way she was raised kind of created this channel of things for it to be the way that it was. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. She, a couple of things there. I mean, her relationship with her mother was fairly complicated. Loved her mother dearly. Did a lot of things for her mother, but we saw that there was a lot of it. It was never good enough kind of situation. It was always, there was always more. It was never the right thing, and I know that weighed on her a lot.
Yeah.
And then as I was growing up, not recognizing myself not recognizing what I was dealing with and not understanding, but also, in fairness, my parents really didn't understand. When you deal with something like anxiety, the behaviors that you adopt can look a lot like laziness. And, my parents really got into a just do it kind of mindset. If there's something you're supposed to do, well, you just do it. Why aren't you just doing it? And
push through it. Yeah. Why,
exactly.
Yeah. And the simplicity of just get it done. How come you're not acting? This needs to be done. Why aren't you moving? Yeah.
Exactly. And
that's tough.
So it's nice to hear her acknowledge that was something that she's now recognizing, because, I didn't really get a sense that was something they understood.
Yeah. Just to elaborate for you, she has the perspective now that the pressure from her parents or her mom, it's almost like if you can picture your family as a funnel, and like this is coming down on your mom and then your mom is coming down on you, all that pressure building up. And she wants you to realize that she sees how she was, and we all have our flaws as human beings, and what we're given and what we can work with at the time. I think she just wants to say that, good on you for seeing that, and you have this opportunity to break the cycle even more because you see it. Just know that with this being the first thing coming through, this is super important for her to convey it. It's not an excuse at all to say you're given what you're given, but it's more like when we can understand what we have in our toolbox and how we are so fundamentally shaped from a young age that it takes a lot to step out of that and change those cycles, but we can at least acknowledge them and try better.
And she had a lot of responsibilities. I mean, she was trying to take care of an aging mother. She had a teenage son. Yeah. My sister is 14 years older than I am, so she was out of the house, but she had a full-blown career that she was trying to manage. She had a lot going on, and I totally understand that. I may not have fully understood it as a teen, but I definitely have understood that for a long time. And I certainly didn't hold it against her in any way. She was never withholding of love or, anything like that. It was just, it felt like the expectations were higher than I could meet at times. And when I couldn't meet them, I couldn't understand why.
Yeah. I feel like these are coming from your mom. She has a story about a bathing suit. Is this something that you're familiar with?
Doesn't jump to mind right now. No, nothing immediate anyway.
All right. Well, apparently, and ask around, there may be a funny story about a bathing suit.
Yeah, I'll have to talk to my dad and find out about that one.
Okay. That
may be something that she didn't ever share with me.
Right. With that, I want to give you some messages that are coming through. And the message I have for you tonight really is you're doing enough. You don't put yourself on this standard of, I need to do more. You do not need to be adding that extra pressure in your life. And it's coming through loud and clear. You are doing enough. And also there was the message of balancing of the emotions in there as well. And I think that, given the conversation we had about your mom and everything, I can see where that can come into play. But I think that when it comes to the message of balancing your emotions, it's make sure you take some time for yourself, for self-care, and that you have some way of stepping outside of the challenges, because we can't be fighting all the time. We can't be on all the time.
True.
And especially if you're putting that pressure on yourself that I can't do enough. I can't, I just can't, and it's because you care. It's because you care so much that's coming out as this form of pressure. And it's like, sometimes we have to take a breath and say, I am enough. We don't hear that a lot in life. We're all so busy, go, go, go. And we don't tell ourselves that, all we see is our own critique, and it's because it's fueled by caring, right? But we can't let that turn on ourselves. The other message is play, break it up with some levity. Never feel guilty about that, so embrace it because you need that too, and there's that balance there as well. So does all that make sense to you?
It does. Thank you. That makes a lot of sense.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you very, very much. This has been enlightening, and it's amazing and fascinating.
So this is a first for the podcast so far, but Paris and I met, what was it, Paris, 2 weeks ago, maybe?
About 2 weeks ago, yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and we recorded a spirit reading together, and here we are with an update, an addendum to the reading. I had asked you about if you knew of a funny bikini story, and you said not that you were aware of. And then you contacted me with an update. Do you want to share your update?
Sure. I'm glad to be back. Since my mom passed, I've tried to keep in touch with my dad more frequently. And I was talking to him just last night, and he was sharing some memories about Mom. He had gotten really sad yesterday or the day before because he had been watching a show about the Rockettes and remembered how much my mom enjoyed a trip to New York for that. And it prompted me to ask about the bathing suit. And so, I said, "Hey, Dad, is there a funny story associated with Mom in a bathing suit?" And his response was immediate. It was, "Oh, yeah." And he proceeded to tell me this story of how, not exactly what I was expecting, but my mother, after they had retired, they lived in a community that had a club associated with it. And she and some of her older friends all had these T-shirts that had bikini-clad bodies, printed on them.
Mm-hmm.
And they would get together and do a skit, a song and dance kind of routine for their club's talent shows. And it was something that they did a couple of years, and they really had a good time with it. And then later on, she went to the retirement community that she worked, and they would have talent shows for the residents. And she would always wear this suit or this shirt and do a song and dance routine that made the residents just crack up. And it was one of her favorite things to do. And it was something that Dad really enjoyed remembering about her. So it was something really good for him to recall. And it was just amazing that he knew exactly what I was talking about. I didn't have to do any kind of prompting or anything. It was just, as soon as I mentioned a bathing suit, he knew exactly what I meant.
I love that.
And it really, my dad's not necessarily the most in tune with the spirit world. I'll put it that way. But it was good for him to know that there had been that kind of a contact. It did mean something to him. And it was really nice to be able to share that with him.
Oh, that's great. I'm so glad that you told him the context of why you were asking, and that message was passed along to him as well. That's great.
Yeah, and I didn't tell him that until after.
Sure.
So it was purely just 100% off the cuff response, and I thought that was fantastic. Yeah. Mom is apparently really good at sharing things that she knows we're going to get right away, and that's amazing.
Would you like to receive a free spirit reading with me? Enter for your chance at italktoghosts.com/guest. Each week, I'll randomly select a name from the list to be a guest on the show. Together, we will talk to the spirits who wish to communicate with you, and our session will be featured on a future episode of I Talk to Ghosts. The spirits are waiting. Enter now at italktoghosts.com/guest.
Hello, and welcome back to I Talk to Ghosts. I'm going to do another mini spirit reading for the listeners of the podcast. I've meditated for a bit, called spirits close, and I have someone with me. It is the brother to someone. He's showing me a car accident. That's how he passed. And he's sharing with me a moment from your childhood together. I guess you guys used to fight over the cereal box, pull it back and forth, who got to read the back of the cereal box while eating cereal in the morning before school. Specifically, Count Chocula and Cookie Crisp. Occasionally your mom would make you eat Cheerios to cut down on the sugar, but yeah, I think Count Chocula was his favorite. As far as a message, he's letting me know that he's celebrating your graduation with you. I suspect that you've been in school for quite a while, and maybe you just went back to get a degree or finish up a degree, but he's acknowledging that he sees that and that he's really proud of you. I'm getting the impression of a trumpet. Perhaps that's something that you can connect with as well. Okay, and I'm going to end it with that. So if these messages are details that definitely connect for you, I would love to know. And if you're listening and can't connect with this message at all, perhaps next time when I do this segment, it will be for you. I'm really interested and intrigued to see where this goes. So thank you for being here and lending your attention and energy and sharing this moment with me. And with that, dear listener, we've reached the end of this episode of I Talk to Ghosts. I hope you've enjoyed your time with me this evening. I love all of the spooky and the spiritual that I can share with you, and I hope you love it as much as I do. And just remember, wherever you wander off to in this world or the next, come back and visit me. Have a lovely evening and good night.